Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Talking Twelves, a Seahawks podcast from Australia. I'm Arif and I'm here today with Emilien. How are you, mate?
Hey mate, how's it going? How's it going to all the listeners out there? I'm excited to start this new venture and talk about the best team in the NFL.
Loving the enthusiasm, Emilien. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be having a monthly podcast discussing Seahawks games, players, and today for our first episode, we're going to have quite a few discussion points, including boom or bust players, season player and team predictions, and we're going to highlight some key matchups in the Seahawks Colts game coming up next week. But first, before all that, we're going to get into some news. And first of all, what were your thoughts overall on the preseason, Emilien?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I was disappointed those first 2 weeks. We didn't really see anything from our starting offense. Obviously, Pete Carroll doesn't want to play the starters in preseason, and fair enough. I wasn't too happy with how the backups played on offense those first 2 weeks. Luckily, we saw a turnaround against the Chargers in that third week, which I really enjoyed, especially from a defensive point of view. That Cody Barton and Marquise Blair touchdown was awesome to see, and I hope we'll see more of them on the field throughout the season. But overall, preseason quarterback play was very, very poor. As you can expect, we don't really need backup quarterbacks when we have Russell Wilson there starting for us, and our receivers were okay. We saw a few low blow injuries that sort of taint our depth a bit. But overall, it's preseason. I'm not expecting a lot of it to translate into the regular season.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of an interesting decision for Pete not to give any of our offensive starters a go throughout the season, but I guess we just got to trust the process. I feel like he knows what he's doing. Maybe they've had their reps in practice and they'll be ready to go against the Colts. So now I guess we can kind of get into thoughts about the 53-man roster now that it's been cut down to that. Honestly, in my opinion, it's probably one of my favorite rosters in recent memory. I think the only real questionable call was carrying 3 quarterbacks instead of 2 like we normally do. I think it would make more sense if they kind of kept that third quarterback on the practice squad, since they have that practice squad elevation rule if need be. But my question for you, Emilien, is considering the fact that we aren't as deep at positions like wide receiver and linebacker, instead of keeping a third quarterback, do you think poaching someone like David Moore off the Raiders practice squad would be a nice addition?
Mate, I'm all for getting David Moore back. Obviously, I'm really outspoken on how much I love that guy as our third string receiver. One of the most underrated in the league, and he's such a good player when it comes to a clutch catch when you need him. Just to name a few, the Panthers game in 2018, I believe, fourth and three, yep. And Russell Wilson just lobs it to him deep for a touchdown to take the lead and ultimately win that game. Who caught that? David Moore. Against the Patriots last season in prime time, week 2, he made an unbelievable catch, catching the ball, making sure his feet were in bounds when they were in the air, out of bounds. He dragged them back in to make that toe tap and catch that ball for a touchdown. He's just such a good player. So I really think that we do need a bit more depth at receiver. Obviously, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are our 2 starting receivers, and they are one of the best duos in the league. But I think we're definitely missing that sort of consistency out of them that we really need in a strong receiving group. So we definitely need to upgrade over there. And David Moore, I think, should have a spot on an NFL roster.
I like your thoughts, Emilien. Now, in terms of recent trades after in the last week or so, Seahawks recently traded a 6th-round pick to the Jaguars for Sidney Jones. Do you think this was a worthy trade, Emilien?
I do think so. I think we need as much help at cornerback as we can get. And I think that obviously with the recent trade, we traded Akello Witherspoon for a 5th-round pick from the Steelers. So we sort of upgrade in terms of draft pick. And whether or not Sidney Jones will be better than Ahkello Witherspoon, that's yet to be seen. I do think that in the right system, any player can be better than another. I do think that, especially when two players are at a similar sort of value. So I think the trade was good. I think they made it knowing that they were going to, deal one of their cornerbacks away for a 5th round pick. So that's how it turned out. And we'll see how it goes. I'm still not confident in Trey Flowers being our CB2. And we'll see if Sidney Jones can maybe step it up in that aspect and sort of provide extra security for our secondary.
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting trade considering Sidney Jones back in 2017 was a bona fide 1st round pick for me, but he ruptured his Achilles at his pro day and kind of slid in the draft a bit to the Eagles. I think he's really talented, but he's had a really horrible run with injuries so far in his young career. And I think something that works in our favor, I guess, is we've had a lot of success in recent times with picking up cornerbacks during the preseason or kind of later on in the season. Most recently with DJ Reed, and obviously a while back, I don't know if you remember, with Justin Coleman. So definitely there's potential there for him to kind of work his way into the team. As you mentioned, the trade for Witherspoon, clearly they've liked what they've seen in Jones so far, and they're willing to give him a go. He could be starting, honestly, fairly soon. Like you said, I guess we'll get into it a bit later with Trey Flowers, but yeah, he's got a lot of potential, I guess. In other news, Dwayne Brown and Quandre Diggs continue to hold out. And personally, I think these deals need to be done as soon as possible. Yes, Dwayne Brown is pushing 36, but he's a very good left tackle when he's healthy. And I honestly think a 1-year extension would be great. Maybe not paying as much as we have been over the rest of his contract, but he definitely needs to return to this team because he provides a lot more than just being a left tackle. He gives a lot of leadership to the younger guys that are coming through the system. And in terms of Quandre Diggs, this is where it kind of gets a bit interesting, Emilien. I feel like he's 28 years old. He's coming off arguably a career best season, and it's kind of difficult. How long would you kind of extend him for? Because they could save $6 million in cap space if they do think about trading him at the deadline. So since he is in this kind of form, and we have Marquise Blair waiting for him in the wings, would it be worth trading him if we could get a big return?
It depends what kind of return. I think that when it comes to drafting the Seahawks, if we get a high pick, they're not known for drafting well early on. I think that their 1st round picks always pan out to be busts or very average players. I think that in terms of Quandre Diggs, when you look at how well he's played over his tenure as a Seahawk, he's been pretty good. I have to say, I've liked having him on the roster and having him be there. I don't think he's an exceptional player, but he makes plays when he does. He had 6 interceptions last year, I believe, so he came up big in certain moments. That being said, with Marquise Blair, I see him more as a sort of hard-hitting safety, but worse in coverage. So I don't know if we get that extra security there, especially with Jamal Adams pairing with him. I think that we need a more safety that's better in coverage rather than a safety that's better at tackling. So it's hard to say. I think that we'll see how they play this year. And I'd rather re-sign and extend Dwayne Brown just because he's been the best part of that offensive line for years now. He's a leader and he's such an integral part to the offense, the success of the offense, and protecting Russell Wilson, that we need Dwayne Brown more than we need Quandre Diggs.
Fair enough. And I guess they have been kind of trialing Marquise Blair at nickel cornerback, so potentially they don't see him as a safety starter as of yet. So hopefully it pans out for the best for both of them, and I guess we'll see how it goes because it will be heating up in the next week. Now into our main discussion points of the podcast, and we can't really ignore the big one, which is the new offensive system under Shane Waldron. What are your thoughts, Emilien? Do you think this kind of system will work in Seattle?
Absolutely, we need the Seahawks need a change of scenery in terms of their offensive scheme. I think Brian Schottenheimer was good for those first few years, and then last year it started off well. But I think the biggest factor here in terms of the success of the new system is how much Pete Carroll interferes with Shane Waldron's scheme. I think that as soon as last year, as soon as Russell Wilson had an off game against the Cardinals, it was a very up and down game in terms of his performance. Pete Carroll sort of put him on a leash and put the entire offense on a leash and had a big say in how they're going to operate. And from then on, the offense was the weak link of the team. So honestly, the more control Pete has over the offense, the more that Shane Waldron is going to become predictable, and that's going to lead to failure. And I hope that Pete Carroll sort of backs off a bit, even if it doesn't work out for one game. I think that you're allowed to fail one game. You're allowed to fail two even. You just can't fail consistently. And that's where I think that Pete should step in. But as long as the team is operating fine under Shane Waldron, and I think he will, coming off that awesome Rams scheme, I think that will be fine. But Pete really just needs to back off a bit and sort of focus on defense, which is where he's needed more.
Yeah, I like those points, Emilien. And in terms of predictability, I guess I personally think it will definitely be a less predictable offense than the one under Schottenheimer, considering all the kind of things that this Waldron offense brings. I mean, two tight end sets is a really big one. And in practice, they've been practicing with putting the tight ends out wide almost. And it's a really interesting concept because they can really judge a lot easily, or even for Russell Wilson, he'll be able to tell whether they're in man or zone coverage just based off that. And I think that's a really big plus. So honestly, like, who doesn't want to see Lockett, Metcalf, Everett, and Disley on the field all at the same time? Like, it's an exceptional group of receivers. And we saw a bit. Another thing that I want to mention real quick is the tempo offense, and this is something that we did get a bit of a teaser of in the preseason, and obviously, the seconds and thirds didn't handle it as well as someone like Wilson would. Obviously, he's a lot more composed than them. He's had a lot more experience, but I did notice that our offensive drives didn't tend to stall out as quickly when we were going in tempo offense. So I think that'll be a great kind of addition to the offense if they consistently can do it over the course of the season.
Absolutely. And just before we move on, clock management was one of the most frustrating aspects in terms of a fan to watch, because so many times you'd get the huddle breaking when 10 seconds left on the play clock. So it's really important for the offense as a whole just to get out and know what they're doing a lot earlier, because so many times we saw Russ barely getting the ball off, and in a lot of cases we got called for a delay of game. So hopefully with with some more fast tempo offensive drives, with that comes better clock management, you'd think.
Yeah, that would be a very nice change. So now that we've talked about the new offense, I guess it'd be good to get into the defense. And my question is, do you think that this year's defense will continue the second half success of last year's team?
If they can stay healthy, absolutely. I think that Jamal Adams brings such a presence and such great energy to the defense as a whole. I mean, you just look at his first game with the Seahawks. You look at that Falcons game. He was everywhere, and I mean everywhere. He was making tackles in the flats. He was out in coverage, hitting hard. He was up in the pocket, collapsing the quarterback in any sort of run play from Todd Gurley. He's just such a good presence. He's such a versatile player that he's that X factor. Our linebacking core is solid, backed by obviously Bobby Wagner, one of the best linebackers, if not the best in the league. And Jordan Brooks is emerging as a really good young player. The defensive line obviously was a big struggle at the start of last season. But once Carlos Dunlap came back and Jamal Adams as well, we got more and more pressure off. I see improvements from people like LJ Collier and obviously Darrell Taylor. So I'm excited for this defense a lot. It's just the matter of being healthy. And if we can get pressure early on a play, that helps the secondary out, which I believe is our weakest position, especially at cornerback.
Yeah, there is a lot of questions that cornerback, but apart from that, it is looking pretty good. I'm pretty optimistic, honestly, about this year's defense. I think the defensive line will improve heavily. I think players like Alton Robinson and Darrell Taylor will bring a lot to the team in terms of their speed rushing. Darrell Taylor especially, since technically it's kind of his rookie season since he didn't play last year with that leg injury. So I'm really excited to see them. And yeah, we do have a lot of studs on our team. And it is very underestimated, the ability of Carlos Dunlap and kind of veterans like that to get the team going. I think another person that hasn't really been talked about that much, it's kind of flown under the radar, honestly, so far this year, is Al Woods. I think he brings a lot, honestly, to that interior defense. Maybe his play has declined somewhat over his career, but I think it was a really good move bringing him back to kind of give his wisdom over to players like Ford and Collier. So it'll be good to see them next year. I'm sorry, this season, this coming season. Um, Now we're gonna get into our players on their last chance, so to speak, and we've picked out four players, two on offense, two on defense, and the first of those is Rashad Penny, and I'm going to start it off on a kind of solemn note, and I don't think Penny will be on the roster in 2022. It really pains me to kind of say this, but I think he might get traded at the mid-season deadline or depart the team in free agency, considering they didn't pick up his fifth-year option. I think that was kind of a telling sign that they didn't do that. Obviously, he is a first-round pick and he gets that option, but I'm not sure. I think people like DJ Dallas and Alex Collins are kind of surpassing him in production. I think the main reason for that though is the fact that he can't stay healthy. When he is healthy, we could really see what he was capable of, especially in that Eagles game and over his rookie season in games like that Rams game in the middle of the season. But the main thing is that apart from running the ball, he doesn't really provide much else. In the receiving game, I think players like DJ Dallas have him covered, and even Chris Carson, obviously, but he's the starter. I think Dallas provides a lot in the return game as well, and on special teams in general. Homer is kind of that pass blocking running back that we won't probably see as much, but that's his main thing in the team. And Alex Collins has kind of he's been that real shifty guy that is kind of taking over Penny's role in a sense. So I think it'll either be Penny or Collins, but I kind of see him as a bust, to be honest. And it really pains me to say it because I do love watching him. So what do you think?
I agree with you for the most part. I think when it comes to Rashad Penny, when he's out in the open field, I think he's one of our best running backs. I think that his speed and explosiveness makes up for that. The problem with him is he struggles to find that space and get past that line of scrimmage. Once he's passed, he can easily make a defender miss and go for a nice run. But it's just getting to that point, struggles for him, find the gap in the O-line or push through. Something that Chris Carson and DJ Dallas, I think, can do a lot more. As you said, DJ Dallas is much more of a little agile sort of back that's more versatile. Chris Carson, bona fide starter. I think keeping Rashad Penny this season, a lot of people were predicting him to be cut off the 53-man roster. I don't think that we should have done that. I don't think that was the right option. I think that we need to keep him mainly for depth this season. Obviously, running back in the past few years has been a major problem health-wise. So I think that it is a shame. I do think Rashad Penny busts this year, and that's from a completely objective point of view. I don't see him sort of overperforming. I see him playing to what he's been playing the past few years, and it's just average, sometimes above average, but it's not enough.
Yeah, we should really highlight the fact that we're trying to be as objective as possible here because as Seahawks fans, obviously we want all of our players to succeed. But yeah, it is kind of looking a bit unlikely that he's gonna get going. And honestly, I completely agree with your point, especially about finding that space. But I guess we'll see how the season goes and hopefully he proves us wrong, I guess. Next player is Ethan Posick, and I rate Persic, honestly. I think they would make a mistake by playing him out of his comfortable position at center. He obviously didn't look the part when he was playing at guard. And the only thing not going for him right now is the fact that he's already lost the starting job to Kyle Fuller. But I think there's a high chance that he will regain that starting spot at some point during the season and show up big time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think last year it's just too much of an anomaly to sort of rate our offensive lineman where he had Damian Lewis, who was in his rookie season or second year. He was playing center. He's a left guard. So it's just weird to see. I think this year with the addition of Gabe Jackson, we have a lot more stability at guard, which means we can have a lot more production at center. So I think that Ethan Posich booms this year. I think he'll get back into his sweet spot and play well. I think the offensive line as a whole steps up. Obviously, as long as Dwayne Brown is there, we need him. So offensively, I think we'll be fine. Offensive line won't be the problem for them. And a big reason for that is just getting those starting guards healthy, staying at their position, allowing for a more comfortable center.
I agree. So our first player on defense is Rasheem Green. And I think the only reason that I've kind of listed him here as on his last chance, so to speak, is because of the emergence of LJ Collier. They play a very similar position, that kind of 5 tech that can play as an edge rusher and also rush from the interior. So I think apart from that point, Green is a very serviceable pass rusher, and he provides around that 3 to 4 sacks mark each season. So if he's able to produce that kind of season, I think he'll be staying on the roster in 2022 and beyond. I think he'll boom, to be honest.
Yeah, we've got a lot of depth at these edge rushing positions. We've got obviously LJ Collier and Carlos Dunlap. Then beyond that, we've got Daryl Taylor and Benson Mayowa. Benson Mayowa had a good season as well last year. So it's a tough for Rasheem Green. He's really got to prove that he belongs on the roster and sort of outperform all these other guys. I'm not sure if he'll do it. Obviously, I want him to. I'd love for all of our guys to just produce and be some of the best defensive ends in the league. But that's unfortunately not going to happen. Some of them are going to absolutely bust. And I'm not sure. I think that a nice rotation at defensive end would be nice. And if, as you said, if Rasheem can get going, he'll have a productive season. And I do think he booms this year.
Awesome. So our last player that I have a feeling we're going to be talking about in quite a few episodes to come is Trey Flowers. And every time we talk about Trey Flowers, I kind of have a similar opinion, and I'm going to stick with it again. I'm sticking with the guy. I think he's going to finally boom. Honestly, I'd love to see him play at his original college position at safety, but that's probably not going to happen due to the firepower we have with Adams and Diggs. I think a main reason why Trey Flowers gets in a lot of trouble is he gets caught ball watching a lot, which kind of it already puts him 1 or 2 steps behind the receiver he's meant to be guarding. I think, though, that Flowers has shown that he can pay back the coaches that show confidence in him. Last year, towards the end of the season, Pete thrust him back into the starting defense, and he really performed. Honestly, I think that was his best season since his rookie season. I think if Pete continues to show the kind of confidence he has been and gives him a consistent run at it at starter, I think he'll do well. What do you think?
I'm still waiting for him to boom. I know you have a lot of confidence, but for me, that ship has sailed. I'm confident that he's not going to play all that well. He's a huge liability. If you had to say name one player who's going to cost the Seahawks their season or certain games, I'm saying Trey Flowers. He can't cover in man coverage. It's so frustrating to watch him play at times. And it really annoys me, especially when you have a good cornerback on the other side. Last year, we had Shaquille Griffin. DJ Reed was also impressive. And then you've got Trey Flowers, who's just sort of blowing his coverage. It's just really frustrating to see. And I'm all for him improving. I would love to see him become a great CB2. I don't see it happening, though. I'm done giving him a chance. Honestly, this is make it or break it. The Seahawks obviously have brought in cornerbacks, and I don't think Pete's going to be shy to replace Flowers if he doesn't perform up to standard to start the season. So we'll see how he goes. But I predict Trey Flowers will bust this year. Sorry.
Brutal but fair, Emilien. I guess he's had a lot of chances, and it's time for him to live up to the expectations of a starting cornerback in the NFL. Now, into our season player predictions. We're going to go through many predictions, such as offensive, defensive player of the year, rookie of the year, breakout or most improved player of the year, disappointment of the year, and then we'll kind of get into our more positional player predictions. But first of all, we're going to kick it off with offensive player of the year. And who is your player, Emilien?
I think it's pretty obvious. It's Russell Wilson. I was debating between either him or DK Metcalf. I think DK Metcalf's going to become one of the best receivers in the league this year. But it's still the Russell Wilson show. He's still our best player on offense, and he has been for ever since Marshawn Lynch retired. It's been the Russell Wilson show, and it's going to continue that way this year. I think with the improvements to the offensive line, he's going to have more time in the pocket. I hope he has better decision making than he did in the second half of last season, because that was quite the thing to watch at times. But I think that if he gets comfortable, he's in his zone. He's the best player in the league at times, and I think that'll continue this year.
Yeah, I went the same route. I picked Russell Wilson. I was really tempted to pick Chris Carson here, because if he can get a full healthy season under his belt, I think he's going to produce wonderful things. But it's hard to go past Wilson. I mean, he's carried this team on his back through some very tough times. And now that he's kind of got the production around him through guys like Lockett and Metcalf, and hopefully we'll find a great gem in D. Eskridge and Gerald Everett. I think he's got everything he needs to just back up what was a great season overall. I do understand what you said about some of his decision-making towards the latter part of the year, and I completely agree. But overall, it was a really great season. I think he can follow that up with another great one. For defensive player of the year, I didn't have to think about this one for long. Jamal Adams for me. I think he's been copying a lot of unnecessary hate, especially with the memes about his one interception compared to Vince Wilfork's two. So I think he's going to back it up with a very well-rounded game. We did see him get 9.5 sacks, and his goals are still set very high in that department. But I think he's going to have a much more balanced kind of coverage, interceptions, and sacks ratio. I think it's going to be really great to watch him this season. He's one to keep an eye on.
Yep, you read my mind. I've also gone with Jamal Adams, because you look at him and you see him talk. This is a guy who's never going to be satisfied with his performance. He always strives to be better. And that's what I like to see in a player, especially on defense. And he's not afraid to admit his mistakes. I remember in the Patriots game, he admitted that he gave up a massive play towards the end. That was his fault. But you just see, I mean, he always strives to be better. It was unfortunate to see him get injured so early on last season and miss a portion of the season towards the middle. But he came back just as strong. And as you said, we're going to see more of him in coverage. Ken Norton did say that. He's had over a year now to adjust to the scheme. I think we'll see some interceptions this year from him. We'll see some good pass deflections, and we'll see some even better sacks from him. It was tough for me to decide between him and Bobby Wagner, but I feel like the absence of KJ Wright is going to make Bobby a little uncomfortable, having to trust Jordan Brooks a lot more now, and we'll see how that goes. But I think Jamal Adams is there at safety. He's there to lead this team. He's there to win, and that's what I love about him.
I think the memes will be kind of grinding to a pretty fast halt after the 2021 season. So now for Rookie of the Year, and there's only a few to pick from, and I think it's pretty clear cut, to be honest. D. Eskridge for me. He's looking like a star. If he can get over his toe injury that's been hampering his progress over the offseason, I think he's going to be a very productive player. He isn't required to have those 1,000-yard seasons like Lockett and Metcalf produce on a season-by-season basis. He just needs to move the chains, play his role. They're going to get him involved a lot, not only in the receiving game, but probably with some end arounds, maybe Even Pete hinted at playing him in the backfield sometimes. I think he's a very exciting prospect with that 4.4 speed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we look at a wide receiver 3 for the Seahawks, we don't expect someone who's going to be a deep threat and just get an 80-yard bomb. We expect someone to really get those first downs on crucial moments when Lockett and Metcalf are covered double team sometimes. So, and we got that at times. When you look at when we had Josh Gordon as our wide receiver 3 back in 2019, that 49ers game, that was such a good game to watch. And Josh Gordon came up big in such clutch moments on 3rd and 5, on 3rd and short. He's just able, if we get a receiver that's, able to get that first down in just a short amount of time, I think D. Eskridge can do that. And that's why I've gone with him as well as my rookie of the year. Sorry, I should have mentioned that from the start. Dwayne Eskridge is my rookie of the year. Obviously, there wasn't really much to choose from, but you look at him, you look at the new offense, I expect to see Dwayne Eskridge be played in some sort of end around plays or jet sweeps. Sort of like a versatile weapon that opposing defenses don't see coming. I think he's going to shock some people this year. I don't expect him to hit the stat sheet like a beast, but I expect him to do his part and play well.
Yeah, I think the fact that that we're moving to this Shane Waldron offense is also going to work in his favor. We saw a lot on the Rams, even players like Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp being used on end arounds quite consistently. And if Eskridge can be that guy and kind of take a bit of the onus off players like Lockett and Metcalf and those kind of scenarios, that would be really great to see. So for breakout most improved player of the year, who do you have?
For me, it was tough. I was deciding between either DJ Dallas or Poona Ford. I have gone with DJ Dallas, so I think that he steps up this year and becomes our running back 2. I think that he leaps Rashad Penny, and he really has shown me that he's really capable of these sort of things. I remember he was thrust into the starting role at the end of the 2019 season because of injuries, and it wasn't really his comfort area. But now that he's had time to develop his skills, I think he's ready to take on more responsibility. He's such a versatile player, and I think that he breaks out this year and becomes a bona fide running back 2.
That's great to hear. I'm going to go onto the other side of the ball, and someone who kind of just needs to play one game to improve on his 2020 season. That's Darrell Taylor. I know technically there's not much to he's my breakout player because this is his first season, and I think, I need to redo this. I need to word it differently. Yeah, why am I so whenever I hold my face, I become a fucking tomato. It's really weird.
I should probably stop it then.
Yeah. Waiting for my face to return to natural color.
Does it matter though? Again, we're not posting.
Oh yeah, what am I fucking talking about? I'm going on the other side of the ball for this one, and he really just needs to play one game to improve on his 2020 season, and that's Darrell Taylor. He's my breakout player of the year. I think that he's going to give Seahawks something that they haven't really had since the times of Cliff Averill, to be honest. That kind of speed rusher. I'm not comparing him to Averill in any way in terms of production. I think he's far off that, but if he can just every now and again just overpower or kind of get around a tired left or right tackle, I think that will go a long way in the Seahawks. I mean, we saw in that Cowboys game, Alton Robinson did that in a very key scenario towards the end of the game when there's a lot of tired players on the field. If Taylor can kind of become that guy, that would be very beneficial to that defensive line. So he's my breakout player of the year. My disappointment of the year is Rashad Penny. I know we talked about him earlier, and it kind of ties into your point that you made just before about DJ Dallas becoming that RB2. He just got a much more well-rounded game, and Penny didn't really find much success when Pete Carroll tried to throw him onto special teams in the return game. I don't think he produced as well as he did in college at that position. So considering the fact that he is only kind of a pure running back and not very versatile in that aspect, I think he's going to fall behind Dallas and potentially even Collins as the season progresses.
Yeah, for me, I hate to say it, but I said it before, Trey Flowers. He's my disappointment of the year, although I'm not sure how much he could disappoint me further. I'm just not high on him at all this year. I'm really not confident in his ability to start. Happy to prove, I'm more than happy for him to prove me wrong, but I just don't see it happening. I think that this year is his last chance and he's going to fumble at it.
Fair enough. So, for pickup of the year, I had to change my answer pretty quickly when Akello Witherspoon got traded. So I have now gone with Gabe Jackson. That trade from the Raiders, I believe it was for a 5th round pick, was very kind of underrated in my opinion. I think he brings, like I was mentioning with Dwayne Brown, I think he brings a lot more than just a playmaker on the offensive line. He's going to provide a lot of leadership to Damian Lewis. I think that's going to be one of the key things. We saw Damian Lewis have a really great start to the season and then kind of dropped off a bit. And I think someone like Gabe Jackson will kind of help him keep his focus, head straight, just go at it. And obviously shoring up the other side of the offensive line will be very important to them because Micah Putty got injured quite a bit and it kind of threw the offensive guard rotation out of whack. So it'll be great to have a guy like Gabe Jackson on this team.
Yeah, I'm with you. Gabe Jackson is my pickup of the year because the offensive line needed stability last year and they didn't get that. They kept on rotating. This year it's different, I think. I think a healthy offensive line led by 2 veterans of the game and some other young pieces, Damian Lewis most notably, I think really brings this offensive line together. Gabe Jackson is going to be a huge part in that, allowing Damian Lewis to play his position properly. He plays his own. We have a more solid center, and obviously our 2 tackles are pretty solid, and one of them is amazing. So yeah, Gabe Jackson is my pickup of the year. A great acquisition, and obviously fixed a much-needed hole in the team.
So now we're kind of going to get into our more positional season player predictions. And our first award, so to speak, is the Golden Glove Award. Emilien, who do you have as our best receiver in the 2021 season?
I mentioned him in my offensive player of the year. I think it's DK Metcalf. Obviously, back on the TDU podcast, I said that DK Metcalf will lead the league in receiving yards. I stand by that. I think he takes another huge leap in production this season. I think he fixes his dropping problem. He has been known for dropping a lot of passes. I think he led the league in drops last year, or was close to leading it. That changes this year. He becomes one of the best players in the league and one of the best receivers.
Yeah, I'm with you. I also have DK Metcalf. I think he's just a freak, honestly. An amazing player. He can do it all. He can go up for it. He can run past people, and he can also pass block, which I think is a very kind of downplayed aspect of a receiver's game, really, especially when you have a great running back in Chris Carson. So yeah, he's going to have a wonderful season, and I really hope the disrespect stops because he's a wonderful player. And I think most of those other NFL fans are just jealous that their team didn't pick him up in the draft. So it'll be great to watch him in 2021. Now to our next award, which is Protector of the Year, also known as Russell Wilson's best friend. And this season, I've gone a bit of a different route, and that is with Damian Lewis. I think he's going to take his game to the next level. I know we have some veterans on the team like Dwayne Brown and Gabe Jackson, but he's very talented. And I think after a strong rookie season, he's going to just back it up with even better, more consistent play now that they're not going to be moving him from guard to center and vice versa.
Yeah, with me, I was thinking Damian Lewis, but I think it's Dwayne Brown. I think that he's still one of the best tackles in the league, and that's going to stay this way. I can't go against him. It's like, for me, this was like saying, oh yeah, Jordan Brooks is going to be better than Bobby Wagner. I don't think that's true. I don't think Damian Lewis is going to be better than Dwayne Brown. And that's why I've gone with Dwayne Brown. But I also see a lot of improvement from Damian Lewis for all the reasons you said, and obviously the rest of the offensive line. So I'm with Dwayne Brown on this one, but I think everyone on that line is going to improve this year.
Now onto the defensive side of the ball, and our first award is the Pressure Cooker Award for the best defensive lineman. Who have you got, Emilien?
For the best defensive lineman, this was a tough one, but I'm going to go with Carlos Dunlap. I think that if he stays healthy, he's just our leader on that defensive line. I really like some of the younger guys on there, like LJ Collier and obviously Daryl Taylor, as you mentioned, Al Woods, Puna Ford. But I think that Carlos Dunlap was one of the biggest reasons we saw from the defense last year of how much they improved. Once he came back, he sort of elevated the production of the whole team. I see that happening again. If he stays healthy, he's a force to be reckoned with and a great leader for all these young players.
Yeah, he's certainly a very great leader on that defensive line. I've gone with a younger guy that's taken his game to a next level in recent times, and that's Puna Ford. I think he's just a lovable guy, honestly, but that's not the reason I'm going to pick him here. I think he's just an incredible talent at pressuring the quarterback. And for a guy of his stature, he plays a lot bigger than he is. He's only 5'11", but he plays like he's 6'6", honestly. Like he pushes guys consistently back into the backfield. He's not necessarily going to be your Jaron Reed who gets 10 sacks a season, but he's going to make his presence felt on that defensive line with a lot of tackles for loss, I reckon. For our next award, the Tackle Machine Award for the best linebacker, and I think that's pretty simple. Bobby Wagner, an amazing player. He's been the anchor of that defense for such a long time now. There was a part of me that was tempted to pick Jordan Brooks for a while. I think that he's going to get there eventually, but he's not at Wagner's level yet. He's got a lot to learn from Bobby, and I think he backs it up with some great play. And I'm going to get into later in the podcast about Brooks versus Wagner in comparison. But for now, Bobby is the man.
Yeah, I'm with you. I said this before regarding Dwayne Brown, Damian Lewis. Bobby Wagner is one of the best linebackers in the league, and it's exceptionally hard for a second-year player to top that. So Bobby Wagner stays our best player at linebacker and our second best player or best player. I think it's completely 50-50 between who's better between him and Jamal Adams. They both bring different skill sets to the team, but both of them are exceptional players. Bobby Wagner is our best linebacker.
Now for the next one, which is the Lockdown Award, a term we're very familiar here with in Victoria. And this is for the best defensive back. And very similarly to my prediction before for Defensive Player of the Year, it is the exact same as Jamal Adams. There's too many questions at cornerback for me, apart from DJ Reed, obviously. But I think Adams is a certified playmaker on this team. Honestly, on any team, he could perform to this level. He's a great fit in Seattle. He's an immense talent, and he's going to back up his very productive 2020 season.
Yeah, I've gone with you. Obviously, my defensive player of the year is going to be the best defensive player at his position. So it's obviously Jamal Adams. Now, if this award was for best in coverage, I probably would give it to DJ Reed, but this is best defensive back, no restriction on what specific aspect of being a defensive back is. So I've gone with Jamal Adams. I think that his versatility and his playmaking abilities are just on another level on this team, and he's just going to be one of our best players for many years to come.
Now into our bold player predictions. We're going to give you one on offense and one on defense. And Emilien, you can kick us off.
Okay, I will admit I have not thought too much about this, so these are going to be pretty on the spot. But for my offensive bold player prediction, I have got Chris Carson and DJ Dallas will combine for over 1,500 rushing yards. I think that we'll see around the 1,000 mark from Chris Carson, and DJ Dallas is going to step up and become a really good running back too. So I think they're going to form a really good 1-2 combo as the season progresses. On defense, I think, get ready for this, I think that DJ Reed gets 5 interceptions at least. That's a big call, considering we're not really known for our interceptions at cornerback. But I think DJ Reed steps up this year and becomes a really good cornerback in the league as a whole. I think that last year he was sort of like a very, very welcome surprise, and I think he takes it to the next level, especially considering how I think offenses are going to sort of disrespect our secondary and start targeting him a lot. I think DJ Reed fights fire with fire and sort of makes his statement and picks off a lot of opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that's a really good prediction, Emilien. He immediately produced on that defense last season. You could see his ball hawking ability, so I really do hope that happens. On offense, my prediction was kind of similar to yours. I think Chris Carson plays the first full season of his career, surpassing 1,200 yards in the process. I think that when this guy is healthy, he has shown that he's very capable of getting the ball 20 plus times and getting over 100 yards. We saw him do it a lot in 2019. Obviously, last season was a bit different, but because they didn't really give him the ball as much. But I do think with a consistent run at things, he is an absolute powerhouse, and I really hope that he kind of takes the onus off Russell Wilson a bit in terms of having to always make that game-changing play. On defense, this is incredibly bold, and I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but I really rate the guy. I think Jordan Brooks leads this team in tackles. Honestly, towards the end of the season, I wasn't completely keeping an eye on a comparison in tackles between him and Wagner, but Brooks was consistently getting pretty high tackle counts. And in the preseason, he was wherever the ball was. I know he was playing against seconds and thirds, but play after play, he was tackling the person as immediately as they got the ball. I think he's got that kind of ability. He's shown that at Texas Tech. And I reckon there's a fair kind of medium chance that he leads the team in tackles. Now into our season team predictions. And in the past when we've done this, Emilien, it's kind of gone horribly wrong in a sense. Apart from your predictions about Seahawks winning the division last year, which I kind of regret not doing. But nevertheless, we'll get into it. It's a bit of a different record prediction this season since we do have 17 games to play. I've gone with 12-5. I think that this will be a kind of regression from last season, and that's only based on how they start. I don't think they're going to start as strongly as they did last season. They've got quite a few tough games coming up, especially with that home opener against the Titans. Now that they've got Julio Jones, we have shown in the past that we're consistently terrible at covering Julio Jones. He goes off in games against the Seahawks secondary. There's a couple other tough ones in there, most notably the Steelers traveling to Heinz Field, I believe. And also we got to travel to Lambeau, and in between all that, just playing the 49ers and Rams, it is a tough beginning to the season. And I think around that period is when most of our losses are going to occur. In terms of division placement, I have them finishing first again. It's going to be a lot tougher this season with the 49ers if they manage to stay healthy. But with the Cardinals kind of gaining a lot of veteran talent and stuff, it's going to be a lot tighter, but Seattle's capable of winning a division no matter what the circumstances. As usual, it's going to come down to those division games, I reckon, but I reckon they've got it handled. In terms of playoff seeding, I've gone with third. I think the only NFC division that will have a lower winning record than them will be the NFC East. And yeah, those are my predictions. What are yours?
Okay, so for the record, I've gone with 13-3. I think we're seeing gradual improvements year after year. They went 11-5 one year, 12-4 last year, and now I reckon they're going to get one extra win. So they'll go 13-4, I believe. Obviously, they have an extremely hard first 5 games. So obviously, we're going to Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. I think we'll take that one out. Then we got the Titans at home. That's also a tough game. The Vikings in Minnesota. That can be tough. That's a tough climate over there. 49ers at Levi Stadium. We're historically good there. So I don't see that as a really tough game. I think it's a hard one, but easily winnable. And then we've got the Rams at home. I think those first 5 games are an extremely tough sort of string of games to start a season. But I think if we can win 3 or 4 of those, we're set. The Seahawks are set for the right path throughout the season. Over the middle, it gets a bit easier, where the most notably hard game is the Packers in Lambeau. That's obviously a place where the Seahawks played bad or haven't had much luck in terms of winning. So overall, pretty hard schedule, but I think that 13 wins is definitely manageable as long as the team stays healthy and the play calling stays consistent and not predictable. In terms of division placement, with 13-4, how else are they going to be anywhere else other than number 1 in the division? I said this on my season predictions over at TDU, but first in the division, I'm confident that obviously it's a very tough division and anyone can reasonably win it. So we'll see how it goes. But I definitely think the Seahawks are capable and worthy of becoming first in that division once again. In terms of playoff seeding, I think they go second. And the reason for that is I think they'll beat the Packers in Lambeau, who I also think will go 13-4 and will win the head-to-head tiebreaker there and causing us to be second in the conference, getting us a nice second versus 7th game in the playoffs in the wildcard round. Unfortunately, though, that is likely going to be against another fellow NFC West team. So we'll see how that goes. And hopefully it's not one that we struggle against too often, like the Rams.
Yeah, that was very upsetting in those last few weeks, knowing we had the division and then we're like, oh, we have to play either the Cardinals or the Rams. Nice. But like you said, I really agree with your point. I think those first 5 games are going to set the barometer of the Seahawks season. It's going to be really telling. If they can get at least 3 or 4 out of 5 wins there, they're going to go a long way in 2021, I reckon. So now that we've kind of talked about that, I think their ceiling is the conference championship. Obviously, this is from an objective point of view, because in my head, as I'm saying this, I'm like Seahawks Super Bowl champions. But realistically, from an objective point of view, conference championship is something that the Seahawks haven't even achieved since that loss against the Patriots. They've constantly seemed to stall out in the divisional games, apart from last year when they only made it to the wild card. I think that's the ceiling. And there's a very big gap between the ceiling and the floor, for me at least. And it really comes down to those first 5 games, like I said. I think the floor is they get surpassed by the Cardinals and 49ers and miss the playoffs entirely based on seeding. Because obviously their division is very competitive, and the non-division games I think they're going to perform well in, but it's about those division games for me. Like I mentioned earlier, the addition of JJ Watt at the Cardinals and the Rams offense with Matt Stafford, those are 2 exceptional veteran leaders, something that both teams haven't had at those respective positions that will really make a difference, I reckon. Kyler Murray is probably going to perform even to a higher level than he did last season. Having all those quarterbacks playing at a high level is going to be tough for the Seahawks defense. These 6 divisional matchups, I reckon, will ultimately decide where the Seahawks finish in 2021.
Yeah. Sorry, before I give my sort of ceiling and floor, I just want to get your thoughts. So if you could pick only one team for each out of the division rivals, so obviously Cardinals, Rams, 49ers, if you could pick one team that the Seahawks are going to sweep over the season, one team that we're going to split the series with 1-1, and one team that we're going to get swept by, which teams would you put in those respective records?
So for the teams that I think we could potentially sweep, I'm going to go with the 49ers. I know that they're going to have a much healthier roster this coming season, but there's a lot of confusion with who's going to be playing at quarterback. And either way, I think our defense has the potential to rattle them. And last season, I'm pretty sure we did sweep them. Yeah. So That was I think we can back that up, especially if our roster is healthy. A team that I think we're going to split would probably be the Cardinals. And in I personally believe that the Cardinals are a team that we should be sweeping, but it tends to happen that we lose at home, and it's really confusing to me why this happens year in and year out. But it's something that happens. I can't really explain it. And a team that I think we could potentially get swept by are the Rams, and that's just based on the defensive line. It constantly happens to Russell Wilson. He continually gets bullied. It doesn't really matter that we have a great veteran duo in Jackson and Brown, and Damian Lewis is playing really good football. Aaron Donald continually just bullies everyone on that offensive line, and that's usually the telltale sign. I want to throw this question back to you because I'm interested in your thoughts now. Who do you think would you change from my predictions?
Nothing. When I asked the question, I had exactly the same answers in mind. When you look at the 49ers, historically, or at least in the last decade, we've sort of owned them. They haven't had much success against us. And I think that this season, we played them in week 5 at Levi Stadium. As I said before, we sort of have a great record over there. And also by that time, I'm not sure if Trey Lance will be starting yet. And if he does, it'll be one of his first games. So you can't expect him to perform at a great level. So I think that we sort of haven't beat that. The second time we play them, that's going to be at Lumen Field now. It's weird to say that. For me, it's still CenturyLink, but we will be playing them at home in front of a roaring crowd full of 12s. And I believe Trey Lance will be starting by that time. That's going to be later on in the season in the last quarter. So if Trey Lance is starting there, this is a rookie quarterback going into CenturyLink Field for the first time of his career, and he's facing this sea of blue and green. I think that's going to rattle him a lot, and it's obviously going to rattle the 49ers who spent last year playing in empty stadiums. So that's why I think we'll have them beat this season, and I think we can definitely sweep them. With the Cardinals, as you said, every year we seem to split games with them. We never seem to sweep them. They win at home, we win over there. Last year was different. Last year they won at home in that thrilling overtime game, and we comfortably beat them at home in prime time. So I think we'll split games again this year. They have a stronger roster. DeAndre Hopkins is going to go off in both games. I think that he's got our cornerbacks numbered. So that's going to be an interesting series. I think we could sweep them. They could sweep us. Both of the games could go either way. So that's the thing. The Rams, though, ever since they've had Sean McVay, they've owned Pete Carroll. I think that Sean McVay has just figured Pete Carroll out so well, and he counters him in such a different way. Pete Carroll's very traditional, old school sort of football style doesn't match up well against Sean McVay's innovative and new schemes. So the Rams definitely have our number and have had our number the past few years, and they're the team I fear most in the division. So after that, I'm going to move on to my ceiling and floor. Sorry about that little sort of side segment. The ceiling for me for the Seahawks is 14-2. And if everything goes right, this is what a ceiling is to me. If everything goes right, what's the most this team can achieve? For me, that's going to the Super Bowl for the Seahawks. I think that DK Metcalf, if he plays to his potential, Tyler Lockett's always reliable. Russell Wilson, if he plays at his MVP level throughout the season, why wouldn't this team be able to go to the Super Bowl with a strong defense backing them? So that's my ceiling for them. And in the Super Bowl, anyone can win, right? So the floor, however, is a 9-8 record. I don't see Russell Wilson having his first losing season this year. Not from this team. This team's too stacked at different positions for that to happen. But 9-8 is enough to warrant last place in this division. That's how good this division is. So that's our floor. We missed the playoffs and we finished last in the division. I don't see it happening, though. I definitely see us being around that top 2 of the division rather than the bottom 2.
So apologies to drag on this segment a bit longer than originally planned, but I am interested by your statement about the Seahawks making the Super Bowl. I thought about that as their ceiling. I thought about it quite a lot. And the thing that deterred me from making that sort of prediction is just how much firepower the Tampa Bay Buccaneers bring. Do you think Seattle would be capable of winning a conference championship, potentially away from home?
If they're healthy. The biggest problem with the Seahawks in the past few years is that, yes, they've stolen at, running back and, in the wildcard round and divisional round. A lot of that is because of injuries at key positions. I mean, when you look at the 2019 season, we won the wildcard game in Philly against the Eagles. We moved to Lambeau and played the Packers. That was a close game. We almost beat the Packers in Lambeau without running backs. So it just goes to show how good this Seahawks team is and how good Russell Wilson is come playoff time. It's just hard to get over that hump and that injuries barrier. So if the Seahawks can stay healthy, that's a big if. I'm not expecting everyone to stay healthy. That's not a legitimate expectation. But if we can limit the number of injuries at key positions and to our best players, why not? I don't see why we wouldn't be able to beat a team like the Buccaneers when we've played pretty well against Brady in the past. Obviously, Super Bowl 49, which we all hope to erase from our memories. It's never going to happen. But apart from that, we've had the Patriots number against Brady. I think that Brady doesn't play his best football against the Seahawks. And you look at, obviously, their receiving core is amazing, and we're going to struggle to cover them. But our offense is better than theirs, in my opinion, and their defense is better than ours. I think it's a very well evenly matched game. Close game, but at any place at any time, why not? Why wouldn't the Seahawks be able to beat the Bucs? I think when it comes to that game in that moment, players are prone to fault, they're prone to mistakes, they're prone to play the best game of their lives. Why not? It could happen.
Fair enough, man. All right, so we're gonna get into our sort of preview for week 1 at the Colts. Just get into some key matchups real quick. Colts offensive line versus Seahawks defensive line. Do you think that Seattle will be able to stop the running prowess of a player like Jonathan Taylor?
Absolutely. And the biggest reason for that is the absence of Quentin Nelson. I think that they'll take advantage of that and they'll be able to close gaps in the middle of the line, preventing Jonathan Taylor from really bursting and sort of breaking out from the line of scrimmage. I think they keep him contained. I don't necessarily think that they'll sort of completely shut him down. I think he'll still have at least 50 yards rushing on the day, or maybe even 70. But this is good practice for the week after when they have to stop the king himself, Derrick Henry. I think that if they're able to stop Jonathan Taylor, it gives me a lot more hope for the week after when they stop the real king of the NFL at running back.
Yeah, I think that kind of loss of Quentin Nelson for the first part of the season is going to affect the Colts greatly. He provides a lot of energy to that offensive line. Obviously, they have some other nice pieces like Braden Smith on the opposite side, a couple other guys there, but he just brings that kind of unrivaled energy to that team. And honestly, even with him, I can kind of see our run defense stopping Jonathan Taylor. In recent times, we've had a lot of success with our run defense when our pass defense has been poor. So I think, honestly, I think our defensive line can probably kind of force Wentz into some bad decisions and Jonathan Taylor into a bit of confusion. DK Metcalf versus Xavier Rhodes. This is going to be an interesting one, especially since Rhodes kind of recovered a bit of his earlier Minnesota Vikings form towards the end of last season. For me, just throw DK the ball. Like, give him opportunities. Russell Wilson did this too late in the wildcard game against the Rams. There were a couple of times when Metcalf just went up over Ramsey and just caught the ball over him. Just give him opportunities. He's such a mismatch with any player on the defensive side of the ball. If it doesn't work out, so be it, but just give him those one-on-one chances earlier in the game and set the tone. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. This is an interesting matchup. You know what else was an interesting matchup early on last season? DK Metcalf versus Stephon Gilmore, and we know how that turned out. I think that if you give, as you said, if you give DK the opportunity to go off, he's going to go off, especially against Xavier Rhodes, who's been very inconsistent in his career. While he found his footing last year, it's not a guarantee that he'll continue to play well. So give DK Metcalf the ball, let him abuse opposing cornerbacks with his size. I mean, as you said before, he's a massive mismatch. So why wouldn't you just toss up the ball and see if you can grab it before the other player, which is more likely in a lot of scenarios?
Yeah, exactly. This is a bit of an interesting one, and I'm not sure how often we're going to see this, but Gerald Everett versus Darius Leonard, I think will be an interesting matchup if they do get the opportunity to play each other. And my reasoning for that is Darius Leonard has proved in more recent times that he's not just a stat collector. He is very underrated in coverage. And I think that the main telling sign of this game is if Seattle splits Everett outside, like they've been practicing in Waldron's scheme, play him as almost that wide. Well, he is a wide receiver in that position. Um, if Leonard goes with him, it will be very interesting to see that kind of matchup. Just confuse the Colts defense a bit and try and exploit some of those matchups. And I think it'll be a very interesting one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how we use our tight ends in this scheme, considering Colts offense was one of the best in the league last year. They were really impressive, and they haven't made too many changes. So we'll see how we play with our tight ends, whether or not we put them on blocking more often than we play them as receiving targets. So we'll see how it goes. I'm not expecting too much out of Everett from this game. I think it's a really big ask for him to step up and just be one of the, a bona fide starting tight end against this Colts defense, against Darius Leonard and such. So I expect our tight ends to progress as the season goes on. I think that they'll find their stride in the back half of the season rather than early on. One thing I do want to mention, though, we haven't listed it here, but I want to talk about the matchup between T.Y. Hilton and Michael Pittman versus DJ Reed and Trey Flowers. So this is going to be a nice entry-level sort of test to our secondary. While T.Y. Hilton used to be one of the best in the league, he's fallen off quite a bit since that time. And he's an above-average receiver. I don't think he's elite anymore. Michael Pittman had a really good rookie season last year, and I think he'll improve. So this is going to be a really interesting sort of matchup to see, can our secondary, especially our cornerbacks, can they handle these sort of above average receivers? Because if they can't, that's a big concern going into the next few weeks when we face the likes of Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, AJ Brown and Julio Jones in week 2. So huge test and really good sort of assessment on whether or not our defense and cornerbacks can handle sort of good receivers.
Yeah, I think this will really set the tone of Trey Flowers this season, honestly. Can he handle emerging receivers like Michael Pittman? Because you're assuming that he'd get the job on a bigger frame like him. I don't think someone like DJ Reed would be able to handle Pittman, in my opinion. I think DJ Reed goes to T.Y. Hilton. And although he has regressed quite a bit, I still think Hilton's got a bit left in the tank. The main issue with him has been kind of staying on the field, staying healthy. He's been very injury prone, but he provides Carson Wentz, if Carson Wentz is a starter, with a bit of a safety net in terms of receivers. Pittman can kind of disappear in games sometimes, and Hilton can kind of be that reliable guy that you can go to when you need a first down. Talking about Wentz, if he does play, which is completely, utterly confusing to me at the moment with all the COVID vaccination drama and his injury that was potentially going to keep him out for 12 weeks, but they're talking as if he's going to play. They haven't put a line through him playing. He's been notoriously bad against this Seahawks team. Do you think that will continue if he does suit up?
Yeah, absolutely. If the Colts win this game, it'll be thanks to Jonathan Taylor and their defense. It won't be thanks to Carson Wentz. I don't see him playing all that well to start off the season, especially if he's coming off a foot injury or foot surgery, no less. I think that he's going to struggle with mobility. And without Quentin Nelson there, I think our defense will be able to keep pressure on him and sack him a few times. So I don't think he has a great showing in this game. He is at home, but it's a very foreign home to him. He's never played at Lucas Oil Stadium with the fans backing him. So it's going to be strange for him too. So I don't see him playing all too well. Good on him if he does, though, but I'm very confused as well by how quickly he's been able to recover when the estimated sort of gap for him was 5 to 12 weeks, and it's only been like 3 weeks since he's been injured. So I don't know. I don't see him playing well in this game. I think that we have his number here.
I agree. I think he's a capable quarterback, but I think the trend will continue in this game. I don't think he's going to perform exceptionally well. And like you said, it will be with that defense, it will be Jonathan Taylor's performance if they do get up. And that brings us to our score predictions for this game. Who have you got?
I've got us winning 20-23 4 in classic Seahawks fashion. We're gonna have an early lead going into the fourth quarter, and then towards the end, we're gonna start playing very relaxed defense. The Colts get a touchdown or a field goal to bring it to a one-score game, and finally, our offense sort of finishes it off with a few first downs. I think that Jonathan Taylor is going to keep the Colts in this game. He's going to go for a nice few runs, but ultimately, I don't think the Colts defense can quite contain Russ, DK, and Lockett to start off the season.
I'm going to go with a 2-score game as my prediction. I'm going to go Seahawks 27 and Colts 16. I think the Colts will manage to get into field goal range quite often. I think Hot Rod will get around about 2 to 3 field goals this game, but they're not going to be able to kind of cap off their drives with Wentz. I think he's going to stall out quite a few times. I think last season, I'm pretty sure Seahawks opened the season with a 2-score win, which is kind of rare for them against the Falcons. So I'm going to go with a similar theme, but as we're going to get into later, I think they're going to have quite a few 1-score down to the wire kind of games. But this one, comfortable win for me. In terms of the rest of our September games, obviously after the Colts, we have another AFC South opponent in the Titans at home. And I think from an objective point of view, and I'm going to have to repeat this a lot throughout our podcast, I think this is a loss. And the last time we played the Titans, the same thing happened. They got off to an early start. They just held the ball, ran the rock. Back then it was DeMarco Murray. This time it will be the King. I think he's going to really tire out that Seahawks defense. In saying that, the Titans do not have a good defense themselves. I think this will be more of a shootout. I'm going to go with a 34-31 L in the second game of the season. I think we'll go into the Vikings game on the road 1-1, and in similar fashion to previous Vikings games, I think we're going to get over the line in a bit of a thriller, 31-28. Kirk Cousins, kind of similar to Wentz, doesn't really play well against Seattle. And similarly to the Colts team, Dalvin Cook will be the man, if any, to get them over the line, and I don't think he'll be able to do so.
Interesting picks. I've gone with the same sort of loss against Titans at home, win against the Vikings on the road. Regarding the Titans, as you said it, Derrick Henry, I think, is going to go off and have a really good game. I think he's going to get 100 yards this game. I think that while our defense is going to be very concerned with, obviously, AJ Brown and Julio Jones at receiver, Jamal Adams, I think, is going to play a very versatile game. And times he'll help with coverage. And obviously, he'll drop down to stop Derrick Henry at the line of scrimmage if need be. But as you said, Titans defense sucks. So I think our offense is going to have a field day too. I've got us scoring 34 on the Titans, but they'll score 37 on us. It's going to be a really, really hard game to win. If we do win it, though, I think our season looks good. Hopefully we can get out of this game without a few injuries. Obviously, it's going to be hard considering how often we're going to have to be tackling a huge behemoth of a running back at the line of scrimmage. And we'll see how we go, but I don't think we'll be able to quite get over the hump of that game. Against the Vikings, I see us winning 30-20. I think that Dalvin Cook is obviously one of the best running backs in the league and their best player, but I think we'll be able to somewhat contain him. And I don't think that the receivers this year are going to be as good as they were last year. I think Justin Jefferson takes a step down, and Adam Thielen, he hasn't quite gone to that elite level that he's really known for. So I think that we'll have their number there. In terms of their defense, it's young, it's improving. They get Anthony Barr back. So I think they'll keep us in check somewhat for a portion of the game, but it's not going to be enough to stop us completely. We'll score 30 on them. I think that we end September with a 2-1 record.
Yeah, it is important to note that those Viking receivers don't tend to perform very well against Seattle, even when our defense isn't that strong. I remember, I believe in 2019, when Diggs and Thielen were those main guys in Minnesota, and for the most part, we completely shut them down until garbage time, especially when it tends to happen when they hype up the Vikings a lot. Like they were hyping up Justin Jefferson quite a bit before our matchup last season, and then exact same thing happened. He did nothing until garbage time. And I think, yeah, it's going to go a similar route there. That concludes episode 1 of the Talking 12s podcast. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. In terms of how often we'll be posting, it will be a monthly podcast, as I mentioned earlier in the show. And we will be posting that to YouTube. And at the current point in time, we don't have any other social media kind of set up for this, but if the interest is high, then potentially we could set up an Instagram page. But for now, check us out on YouTube. That's all from us today. But next month we'll be getting into more of our season recap. It will be more season recap based. There'll be most months there'll be 3 to 4 games played, and we'll have a lot to talk about in terms of that. So see you then.